Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Saice Transport Division, I welcome you to our first event for 2021. The Saice Transport Division is the home of traffic and transport engineers, technicians, and technologists. Our overall purpose is the advancement of traffic and transport engineering in South Africa. My name is Erin De Silva, and I'm a civil engineer and town planner. I have my fellow engineer, or wing woman, here with me, Retshepile Kabo, who is a geometric engineer. We will be handling this event, and should you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them in the Q&A section. As we go through the session, questions will be answered either in the chat box, or if we have enough time at the end, we'll try and address as many as possible. Before we get into the session, please can everyone ensure that they have opened up Mentimeter. We've provided the link and the code in the chat box. Just want to check that it is there quickly. Okay, it is there. Fantastic. So you'll use Menti to input any of your comments or answer the questions that we've provided, and then you can follow the results here on Zoom. As we progress through the presentation, there'll be an opportunity for you to input your name. This is because we've presented a few questions. So you can either use your full name, or else you can accept the name that Menti provides. I encourage you to use this opportunity to engage with us through answering our questions, proposing ideas, and participating in the few other activities we have included in the presentation. The session will be recorded and uploaded on our website, should you want to review it at a later stage. So now I'll hand over to Tepi just to do the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. As mentioned, my name is Retshepile Kabo, and I'm a geometric engineer. The topic for today's session is sustainable transport for a better world. We have chosen this theme as today is World Engineering Day for Sustainable Development. I hope you all know that. The transport industry is a major direct contributor to employment and national and global gross domestic product. Additionally, the efficient mobility of people, goods, and services is a vital enabler of sustainable social and economic development, connecting people to basic services, jobs, market, and each other. Sustainable transport is sometimes referred to as green transport, same as green building. And sustainable transport refer to the broad subject of transport that is sustainable in the sense of social, environmental, climate impacts. Components for evaluating sustainability include the vehicles used on roads, used for roads, water, or air, the source of energy and infrastructure used to accommodate these transports. It also looks at accessibility and equity of systems, safety of systems, and how it has shaped the area in which it is found. So the World Engineering Day for Sustainable Development was proclaimed by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, also known as UNESCO, at its 4th General Conference in 2019. This day is celebrated worldwide on the 4th of March each year ever since 2020. The day offers an opportunity to highlight engineers and engineering achievements in our modern world and improve public understanding on how engineering and technology are central to modern life and for sustainable development. So as engineers, we need to recognize the importance of our work in shaping a better tomorrow. But also we need to be cognizant of the impact as well. In response, we thought it was important to celebrate this day and our members. We also wanted to bring into perspective the role that transport plays in achieving sustainable development and hopefully inspire our young members to actively embrace sustainable transport. As Erin has said, we encourage you to engage with us this evening. And before I hand back to Erin, may you please indicate in the chat box which tertiary institutions are represented. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you so much, Sabri. So we'll start off with a short video that was produced by the World Wildlife Fund in 2018 as part of their series, Cities Rise to the Challenge, Sustainable Urban Mobility. Keep an eye out for the South African examples in the video.
Well, to work on sustainable mobility, I would say be ambitious and be a bit crazy in the way you're looking at your city. We are inventing something new, so it means a bit of political will and conviction, but what is coming next is really enthusiastic against.
The transportation of people and goods account for nearly a fourth of global carbon dioxide emissions, making it one of the greatest challenges facing cities today. But it also presents a great opportunity for low-carbon urban development. Cities around the world have begun to recognize these opportunities and are busy transitioning from the current fossil fuel dependency to a future built on energy efficiency and renewable energy, a shift that protects the planet while improving people's lives.
Mobility, I think, is one of the most important aspects that have an influence in climate change, in air quality, and especially in the quality of life of citizens.
Yeah, Paris is very much engaged in the Sustainable Mobility Program. I would say we have support another mobility, low carbon, less polluting mobility, like with the things we did with Velib or Autolib, the electrical and bike sharing system we have. And to reduce the individual cars within the city. And all that policy together has like co-benefits right now on everyday life for the people.
The role of the private sectors and the role of the cities of the future is extremely important. Actually, I have never felt before to the extent that we as a private sector will be part of the solution.
Sustainable urban mobility requires a mind shift, one where we move from carbon-intensive modes of transport to more sustainable solutions like electric vehicles, car sharing, the expansion of bicycle and pedestrian lanes, as well as an overall shift from road to rail freight.
50% of all the trips that we do within the city are less than 8 kilometers. And this is where the bike becomes very efficient for these shorter trips. And that's why we've increased our public bike system. We're increasing our bike lanes, our culture to have responsible cyclists.
Cities of the future will be much more dense, the streets will be much more narrow, and we as a transport supplier need to be able to fit into that with new technologies, new sizes of trucks and buses. And for instance, going electric, as we are doing right now, means that nowadays you can actually have your bus stop inside the building that you live in. And you don't need to go out in the rain to wait for the bus.
Where suitable, Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT, is another promising transport solution for cities. Here buses are given priority through a system of dedicated bus lanes, which enables them to avoid traffic congestion and thereby run more quickly and efficiently.
The BRT system in Mexico City has really allowed us to include public transport in many of the busiest and more important streets in Mexico City. Because we know that the BRT lines have been so successful, is that we are increasing our BRT lines. And something that is very interesting is that the city card for transport includes the BRT lines, the subway station, the electric system for public transport, but also our public bike system. They're all included within this same card.
biggest challenges are how in mobility is how you change behavior. After public policies, how you take people on board with you, how we all collectively accept that the world is changing, the way the city or are organized is changing, and that beyond the obvious action that a city must have, citizens themselves also have to change the way they are looking their city and using that city, and that's the condition to build a more sustainable place to live.
Cities can't do this alone and are often dependent on the participation of their citizens.
In this particular instance, we aim to encourage the communities to consider alternative means of transport such as cycling and public transport such as our REN bus. But then basically it is also to relate the story that we make it each and everybody's responsibility to reduce carbon emissions in the city.
Adapting solutions to local conditions enables cities to provide transportation options to people in low-income areas, thereby setting off a whole chain of positive outcomes such as better access to services as well as the local job market.
From an economic perspective, it's very much connected between transport growth and GDP growth. It's completely connected. We can make people grow, we can make cities grow, we can make business grow and countries grow, but with a reduced CO2 footprint. And that's where sustainable transport solutions is, where you can combine the economic sustainability, the environmental sustainability, and the social sustainability.
Stakeholder engagement is the key to success as we aim to significantly lower greenhouse gas emissions, particularly in the area of sustainable urban mobility. We need to see engagement at all levels and throughout society. Decision makers who dare to implement bold public policies, innovative companies that contribute to the creation of people-oriented, low-carbon solutions, and citizens who strongly support the development of attractive, sustainable places to live and work.
We can see that cities are indeed rising to the challenge. However, we need to do more. This video provides us with a few takeaways that we'll come back to as we progress through our presentation. These include, transport is linked to the city, which is linked to our people. We must view it holistically. Transport growth enables economic growth. However, we need to ensure that it's well planned. We aren't going to transform our transport systems with conventional thinking. We need to be innovative. Sustainable transport requires a mindset shift, which means that we must actively promote it, motivate the need for it, and ultimately get people and politicians on board. When considering alternative transport options, we need to consider the carbon footprint and the energy requirements. Private and public sector need to collaborate to achieve sustainable transport. Transport solutions need to be grounded in the local needs. We need to shape bold policies and actively promote the behavior change. We need to engage our citizens and communities and foster responsibility. So I hope you're feeling quite inspired after our video and ready to put forward some ideas on how we can make the South African transport industry more sustainable. In line with World Engineering Day, we wanted to highlight the Sustainable Development Goals transport directly affects, namely Sustainable Development Goal 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. It must be noted, however, that transport impacts nearly all the SDGs. However, before we can jump into these 6 goals, we need to identify what sustainable development truly is. Sustainable development is the overarching paradigm of the United Nations. The concept of sustainable development was described by the 1987 Brundtland Commission report as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. There are 4 dimensions to sustainable development, namely society, environment, culture, and economy, which are intertwined and not separate. Often we see that culture is left out of this. Sustainability is a paradigm for thinking about the future in which environmental, societal, and economic considerations are balanced in the pursuit of an improved quality of life. For us to get to this point, the United Nations have developed 17 Sustainable Development Goals and targets, which assist individuals, corporates, and governments in becoming more sustainable. From the video, I'm sure you've already started mapping out how transport affects each of the listed SDGs. We'll now look at them in more detail. SDG 3, which is known as ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all at all ages. The way that transport works to actually achieve this goal is by reducing deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents, providing accessibility to medical services, promoting equitable transport systems, and promoting healthy lifestyles through the provision of active mobility, which is walking and cycling. The 2030 Agenda, which all the Sustainable Development Goals actually come from, includes an ambitious target to halve the number of global deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents. SDG 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Design safe passenger transport solutions and practices that reduce women's vulnerability. Integrate the needs of women and girls into transportation and infrastructure policy making and decision making. Attract and retain a higher proportion of female workers in the sector, and promote the inclusion of women in company boards and ensure women empowerment principles are included in core business operations. SDG 7, which is ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. We can do this by ensuring vehicles are designed in a manner that promotes efficiency, ensuring intermodal and transmodal transfer systems are well designed and implemented to increase energy efficiency, as well as promoting the use of alternative energy sources, such as biofuels, which reduce the impact on the environment and people. SDG 9, building resilient infrastructure, promoting inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and fostering innovation. Transport does this by creating innovative cross-cutting partnerships between public and private sector to unlock projects. Integrating rigorous social and environmental impact assessments and mitigation strategies into the development of major infrastructure projects, including technologies in infrastructure to provide data for whole life efficiency monitoring and ensuring freight systems are run efficiently. SDG 11, making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. We do this by improving the safety of transport modes, improving links between urban and rural areas, thereby opening up new socioeconomic opportunities, such as increased access to jobs. Ensuring we are providing transport solutions that get people conveniently, efficiently, and safely to their destinations. Monitoring and reporting transport-related data to inform public policies, which help to manage urban growth, reduce traffic congestion, reduce greenhouse gas emission, and improve air quality. And finally, SDG 13, which is take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. We do this by ensuring transport systems run efficiently to minimize transit delays, include climate risks in decision-making, invest in resilient systems, institutions, and climate-smart technology to reduce, mitigate, or adapt to climate-induced change, and actively measure the climate-related data. We can also inform public policies on urban design and transport infrastructure, including multimodal, enabling transport corridors to accelerate the transition to more sustainable cities and transport networks. In the transport industry to achieve some of these goals and make it sustainable. It also begins to complete the picture of what true sustainable transport is, not simply an electric vehicle. It must be stated that the points I've raised above under the various SDGs are in no way exhaustive. However, they do provide some food for thought and hopefully spark some ideas within you. This is our first interactive exercise. Here you have the ability to come up with 3 words that you feel describe the South African transport system. We'll give it a couple of minutes just to see what comes through. I think we'll give it about 2 more minutes, just so you can see that 10 people have submitted some of their thoughts. Okay, great. So from the word cloud, I think the one that stands out the most is congested, which is perfect, because that fits in perfectly with exactly what we're going to be talking about. We also can see that it's inefficient, unreliable. We've got obviously taxis, there's a lot of traffic, it's chaotic, politically influenced, busy, unsustainable, car-based, fragmented, overwhelmed, there's pollution, space-consuming, again, car-focused. We can see that there's potential. I like that. I'm glad that we're at least identifying that we do have potential. Poor maintenance, room for improvement, well, at least that's good as well. Underdeveloped, no maintenance, disjointed. So I think from that, we can see that it's pretty negative. What we feel our South African transport system isn't very good. And we're feeling that there's a lot more that we can do with it. And I feel that, you know, with saying that there is room for improvement and it being underdeveloped, that we can obviously start employing people and thought and technologies to obviously improve this. So you can continue putting in your thoughts. I'm going to go to the next slide though. So this is a question. So here you'll be asked to please put in your name. You don't have to put in your name. You can accept the one that Menti has given you. We'll just give a couple of seconds for people maybe just to keep signing in or putting in their names. I've seen that 27 people have managed to sign in. Okay, seems that okay, so here's the question. True or false, 6 South African cities are found within the top 10 most congested African cities. The answer is indeed true, which is quite a shocking statistic. According to data gathered by location technology company TomTom, 6 South African cities are found within the top 10 most congested cities in Africa. Covering 416 cities across 57 countries on 6 continents, TomTom Traffic Index ranks urban congestion worldwide. Cairo took the top spot with a congestion level of 40%. What this means is that a trip will take you 40% more time than it would during Cairo's baseline uncongested conditions. Baseline conditions per city is calculated by analyzing free flow travel times of all vehicles on the entire road network, recorded 24/7, 365 days a year. Next in the African rankings are Cape Town at a staggering 52%, Johannesburg at 30%, Pretoria 25%, East London 22%, Durban 19%, and Bloemfontein at 13%. Each of our cities has specific conditions that may hamper or alleviate congestion. However, one thing is for certain. From these statistics, it's clear to see that we need to reduce single car usage. Traffic jams and congestion is a phenomenon that is incredibly unsustainable and has an impact on all three spheres of sustainability. Without failure, people find traffic a tremendous inconvenience. Congestion occurs when there's not enough road space. For the volume of vehicles. Congestion occurs as a result of many factors, which include but are not limited to population growth, increased vehicle ownership, poor land use planning, and poor public transport systems. As engineers, congestion is an expensive headache. We cannot simply increase capacity of roads by adding more lanes as demand will respond. We need to reduce the number of cars on the road, and to do that, we need to change mindsets about public transport and active mobility. As we unpack the impacts of congestion on each sphere, cast your mind back to the SDG slide, and you'll see how congestion hinders the achievements of goals 3, 7, 9, 11, and 13. The impacts of congestion on society can be explained rather simply, as I'm sure most, if not all of you, have actually experienced it. Congestion wastes people's time, and we all know that time is finite. By sitting in traffic, what happens is we reduce the time available to people to do what they want with that time. It results in unhappy people and negatively impacts quality of life. Further, traffic brings out the worst in us. Therefore, we see an increase in bad behavior, which results in more traffic accidents, and then this drives the vicious cycle. From an environmental perspective, congestion has a massive impact on our climate. Our vehicles, if they're not electric, burn fossil fuels, which produces large quantities of carbon dioxide. Carbon emissions trap the heat in the atmosphere, and this leads to climate change. As it was highlighted in the video, globally, the transport industry contributes roughly 70% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And of that, about 12% is road transport. Congestion results in increased idling time of engines, which in turn uses more fuel, and this obviously contributes to more greenhouse gas emission. So it's becoming more and more evident why we need to consider changing our behavior and reducing the number of cars on our roads. Other environmental implications of cars is noise pollution, land consumption, and damage. From an economic perspective, congestion is incredibly costly. Inefficient transport networks directly result in time wastage, and I'm sure everyone knows the saying that time is money. I've alluded to the time impact from an individual perspective. However, we must also acknowledge the impact time wastage has on freight systems and global supply chains. Furthermore, increased travel time drives up our travel costs and can result in lost business opportunities and a decrease in productivity. So with congestion comes a plethora of negative impacts for our citizens and our cities. So therefore, we need to start changing the way that we speak about transport. And we need to enable this mindset shift to a more sustainable mode like public transport or active mobility. Okay, so this set of images illustrates what we've just spoken about. Moving from right to left, we can see that the space requirement for different modes of transport. This specific study looked at the space requirements to move 60 people. On the right, we can see the space requirement for single car usage. I might just add that 60 cars could even fit in that frame. Then in the middle, the image shows the space requirements for pedestrians and cyclists. And finally, on the left, we can see that all those people can fit in one bus. So hopefully by now, you've started understanding the ideas in which transport can actually become sustainable and how we can start having an impact on our industry. Right, so we're going to have another quiz. What is one of the biggest obstacles in providing viable public transport systems in South Africa? Right, so the answer here is indeed people's mindsets. Sure, the other options do definitely play a role. However, fundamentally, we cannot provide viable public transport systems if we don't get the necessary ridership. In South Africa and other areas of the world, car ownership is seen as a status symbol. People see car ownership as having made it. The type of car you drive distinguishes yourself from others. However, this mindset is obviously detrimental to our future. Interestingly, though, data acquired after the hard lockdown of the COVID-19 pandemic has shown that people are no longer solely basing their vehicle choice on status, but are now also considering their health. So this is an example of how changing dynamics within the transport industry requires innovative thinking. Throughout the presentation, we've alluded to the need for us to drive behavior change and get citizens to accept the responsibility that sustainable transport starts with them. We can do this by assisting governments to create bold policies, actively talking about public transport and the benefits of it, and channeling funding into this area. I love this quote by Enrique Peñalosa, who was the former mayor of Bogotá, Colombia. He said, "A developed country is not a place where the poor have cars, it's a place where the rich use public transport." And I think this message is the one that we should be driving, and it sums up this mindset change that we need to create. So we have spoken about how poor land use planning can actually impact transport systems and potentially lead to congestion. Here we'll look at the interaction of transport and land use and see how transport shapes our cities or influences land use, and how in return land use informs transport. So transport affects land use as land use affects transport. These two components are parts of a complex ecosystem that work to ultimately improve the functioning of the city or the area under question. So if we look at the cycle on the right-hand side, we can see that transport improves accessibility. Now this might be to socioeconomic opportunities, housing, medical, etc. This in turn provides the numbers or the ridership, which begins to shape land use such as residential areas, business districts, mixed-use precincts, and then this drives the economy. This then informs people's activity patterns, which then demand certain transport options. So we can see that this is a dynamic relationship and it's constantly evolving. However, there are various other factors that we need to consider for this relationship to be established. And this is one of the biggest things as why some transport systems work and why others don't. There are 5 main factors that shape the type of transport and land use that can be provided within an area. The first 3, namely landscape, economic processes, and demographic processes, have a profound impact on the type of transport you can provide within an area. The landscape will dictate whether a certain mode is feasible, just as the economic and demographics of the area will also dictate this. So here we come back to that whole mindset of people. If we cannot get people to shift from their private cars into public transport, we cannot viably run the system. Looking at the public policy factor, this is the overarching guidance tool that shapes our transport system and includes planning, maintaining, and upgrading of roads and services, as well as the funding of public transport systems and other functions. Alterations in public transport can affect how transport systems function, and similarly, a lack of enforcement is also detrimental to these systems. So the video spoke of bold policies, and it's in this area that we literally can shape our future transport systems. The last factor is technological change, and this is becoming really important. The trend towards digitalization has altered how passengers use and interact with transport. We are witnessing an increase in on-demand services with a general increase in the demand for flexible urban mobility. This brings us back to that video, where it was stated that we need to be innovative as we cannot simply plan and provide transport solutions in the way we have always done. So in summary, when we look at a transport system, we cannot simply look at it in isolation. Transport in itself is not a means to an end. We must view the entire ecosystem and understand the wider role that transport plays, as well as the local needs and requirements that shape the system. And this is where citizen and community engagement is essential. We cannot simply take a solution from another country or another area in South Africa and hope that it's going to work. You need to really grasp what is happening in that area that you're working in and shape that, the solution, use that to shape your solution that you're coming with. Right, so now it's another interactive activity. So what I'm going to ask is the people that are on Mentimeter, can you please go and rank these 5 options in terms of what you feel is the most important of them in order for us to create a more sustainable transport system? So I've spoken a lot about how transport affects our lives, the economy, and the environment. I've highlighted that transport planning and the provision is far greater than a road or a bus. It's a dynamic relationship that is specific to an area that you're working in. We've discussed a few ways in which we can potentially improve the sustainability of transport systems. However, we're now putting it up to you to drive the conversation and tell us how you think we can do this. So we can see that a few people are on Menti and they're starting to vote this. I'm going to give it about a minute just to see that everybody has a chance. Okay, so we've had 26 people come in rank. Okay, it's just up to 13, fantastic. So I'm super excited to see that in first place is mixed use neighborhoods. Because I think fundamentally this is the way that we actually need to drive sustainable transport. We need to bring jobs to people and no longer people to jobs. It's incredibly unsustainable. And this is how we should start shaping our systems. And obviously this will start shaping our transport solutions. Active mobility also incredibly important for sustainable transport. It provides that finer grain coverage, and obviously it doesn't have the impacts that motorized modes have, which is obviously incredibly important in the sustainable system. Identity settlements as well, equally important. However, it's a lot more difficult for us to try and control this, particularly within South Africa. We've seen that we have these sprawling neighborhoods where we have people that obviously like to live in their own house. There's also a bit of a cultural sort of aspect to this, because we found that people want to have the garden, they want to go out and see their cows. They might not necessarily want to live in a high-rise building in a small apartment. So this is something that we really need to grapple with, and how do we get to the bottom of this? And then in 4th and 5th, I'm glad to see that electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. We've seen that some people say that the solution to a sustainable transport system is an electric vehicle. And while it doesn't burn fossil fuels, we need to consider where is that energy coming from. In a country like South Africa, where we have our power coming from coal-fired power stations, that's incredibly unsustainable. And although it might seem like it's, we're reducing by not burning fossil fuels, because we're now increasing the power demand, we're actually still probably close to that same greenhouse gas emission. And then with autonomous vehicles, well, we're not reducing, depending on what the vehicle is, we're not reducing the number of vehicles that are actually on the road. So if we all get an autonomous vehicle, yes, safety might increase, but it's not necessarily going to help us create more sustainable systems or cities for that matter. Right, so now that we've come to this point, we want to ask you, what should we do to make South Africa's transport system sustainable? So here you can either put it in the chat box if you're not in Menti, or else if you are in Menti, there should be an option for you to submit your ideas. The previous one showed you what my ideas are towards creating a sustainable city and transport system. So here, give it a shot. There's more right than wrong answers, but just give it a shot. Let us know what you're thinking, and then we'll deal. I'm going to give you about 2-3 minutes. Great, so we've got some people that have started submitting. This is awesome. Okay, we've had 8 responses so far. Okay, as we start getting populated, I'm going to start speaking about the top one. So it says more work from home jobs. So more work from home jobs means that there's going to be a decrease in demand of transport, which means that potentially we could decrease the number of single cars on the road. However, it could also mean that we're reducing the ridership on some of our public transport systems. So that could be potentially problematic. Educate people, I love that one. This is definitely how we're going to get the mindset shift. Creating a safe environment, also equally important. That goes hand in hand with how do we get people to shift? We need to ensure that the public transport systems are attractive. So that means that they are safe, that people feel comfortable on using all of that. The next one we have is make transport systems safer for women and children. That they will drive the mental change in society. Agreed, very, very good points. And I think that links up to that educate people. We've got again, educate communities on sustainability, also a very good point. Address inefficiencies in the currently available systems to harness their full potential. I think that's a really good point as well. We saw that some people said that, you know, the South African transport system has a lot of potential, and, you know, we're not addressing it correctly in that. And I think that is a really good point, is why recreate the wheel when you can actually just enforce it or actually redesign, well, not redesign it, but, you know, supplement it in a way that can actually improve sustainability. Move from car-centric cities to people-centric cities. That is great. I'm so glad to actually see that. We need to start prioritizing people, because streets are actually for people, they're not for cars. And I think that is a really great motive for it. If we start making that the road space supposed to be a public space and people are supposed to conglomerate there and, you know, have a great time, then we'll start getting the shift in mindset. We've got improved public transport and perceptions towards it, e.g. the hard train. Another very good point, goes back hand in hand with educating our communities. Smart mobility, a good point. That makes the question is, are we ready for the smart generation, if I can put it that way? The smart city drivers are quite interesting, but we need to understand is, are we ready for that? But I do like the whole idea of smart mobility. Encouraging use of public transport, we've got that. Make it an attractive option and use incentives. I like that. Instead of penalizing people for using cars, maybe we should incentivize them to use public transport. Improve perception. That's fantastic. If they bring in security, it's all about safety and accessibility. Another good thing is that we find a lot of our settlements actually cannot access transport, and that's why we have these low ridership values. A rapid introduction of non-motorized transport, such as bike lanes. While I really like that, is our society ready for that? We've seen that South Africa is actually quite ill-behaved on the road, so we'd have to really look at how do we do this, because simply painting a lane on the road, we've seen it in Saice, doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to use it, or that other cars are not going to drive in that lane. So this requires a lot more effort, but I'm glad that we started to think about it. This one's funny, traffic lights at work. Okay, point taken. I think we need that as well. Effective maintenance, yes, again, it's a crucial part of our transport systems. Without it, you know, vehicles could be running inefficiently, they could be damaged, etc. So that's a good one. So this is all great. So I think there's a whole amount that have come through here, and what I'll do is that I'll actually, you know, just scan through a few of them, but we'll address it now in the questions section. Okay, right. So this is my actual closing slide, and you know, when we look at factors that affect sustainability, we need to go back to what the definition of transport actually is. And it's the provision of infrastructure and services to move people and goods from A to B. However, as simple as that may sound, we must ensure that we're addressing all the elements that make up this puzzle. So we've seen in the video that, we've spoken about how transport can increase economic growth, how we obviously need mobility and sustainability, how it impacts quality of life if we increase the accessibility of transport, how safety and security play a fundamental role in that. Politics, we need to get them involved. We need to get them talking about what a sustainable transport system is. We need to ensure that we're creating socially inclusive transport systems that comes hand in hand with our community engagement. We need to obviously market and communicate these ideas because that's how we're going to foster this shift in thinking. Then our land use, like how can we actually start creating our mixed use precincts so that we get jobs to people instead of people to jobs. And then we need to look at the environmental aspects. Where is our energy coming from? And that's the whole thing, is why can we not just simply put an electric vehicle on? Because we cannot actually allow the coal-fired power stations to propel it. Then we have to look at technology. How do we harness the power of technology to create innovative solutions and information, which is fundamental to actually driving this whole thing. And then just looking at the bottom, we need transport authorities that can obviously drive this. We need bold policies to drive this, regulation acts and bylaws. So we need to ensure that we're enforcing them well, to ensure that our transport systems are functioning effectively, and we need to get financial resources. So we really need to push this to start funding this. Right, so I do have the last slide is for questions, but I think what I'm going to do rather is that I think there might be a few in the chat box. So Tsepi, if you want to maybe just help me now and see if you want to address a few of those. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then I'm going to have a look at the other solutions that will put forward to making our transport system more sustainable, and possibly looking if we can link those back to some of the questions. But now we have 8 minutes, so you're more than welcome to put forward any questions that you have, or even any ideas. And if we don't manage to get through all the questions, I think what we'll do is we'll create a pack that we will send out once this has been uploaded onto our website. So yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Erin. One question that I saw was from Rian earlier when he asked, is congestion based on vehicles or persons? Yeah, that's a debate for that one, because congestion is mainly all these vehicles that are in the road, but at the same time, it's people who are the ones who are buying those vehicles, who are in those vehicles. Like you make the example of if people would use buses, they would fit in buses, 60 people would fit in a bus than them using their own individual vehicles. So for me, I would say congestion is mainly based on people. I don't know what you think, Erin.
So in terms of congestion on the road, we're definitely looking at vehicle congestion because it looks at what is the volume of vehicles within a certain space. But in other areas, we do look at people congestion. So for examples, in say transit system stations, so in your train stations and stuff like that, we look at areas of congestion, which is obviously relating to people, such as stairwells or something like that. So it's a good question. I think we just need to define which congestion we're actually referring to. But in this one, we were referring to road congestion, which was vehicles. Okay, I see Gordon Lang has put forward a comment saying maybe we should reconsider the definition of transport and look to a means of creating affordable access to opportunity. This embraces the concept of mixed-use precincts, opportunity closer to residents, as well as telecommuting, working from home, which is not a means of transport, but a means of accessing opportunity. So I think that's a really good point. Transport, I think transport we obviously date back in terms of what transport is. So I suppose we could reconsider the definition, but I think that's more of a holistic viewpoint, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I think that does feed into, this whole transport ecosystem that we were talking about you know. But I think what we'll do is maybe we'll consider that comment a bit more, and we'll provide some feedback on that later. Okay. So I see that there's a really great amount of interaction here on the chat, which is fantastic. So we've got here, can you elaborate on what kind of technologies? So when we look at technologies, and I think this is where we relate it back to smart mobility, you know, we've got apps where we've got on-demand e-hailing, which is your Ubers. So it's that sort of technology where you can actually physically track your fleets or where your cars are, so you can see, so it increases safety, it increases efficiency. So there's that sort of technology. There's other technology coming out like TomTom, where they use it to track congestion. We can also use it to track how our drivers are driving. So I know some of the insurance companies do that, and you get rewarded because of that. But we could bring it back into creating a more sustainable transport system, because we're ensuring that, you know, people are driving well, and that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of comments, which is fantastic. I'm so glad that you all actually got involved with us and you know, really had a great time with us. So what I'll do is that I'll take a chance now just to see which universities were actually here with us, which is fantastic. Okay, let's see here. UCT was here, University of Pretoria, University of Johannesburg, Civil and Transport Engineer plus MPhil in Urban Design and Regional Planning. That's quite a mouthful, but that is fantastic. UCT, fantastic. So I'm glad that we had quite a few of our universities here. I see that there is 3 questions that have come through on Menti. The first one, I'm just going to, I think, close with these 3, and then Seppi, if there's anything else you want to say, please do jump in. Okay, so the first question is, how do we turn the tide on how transport planners are trained, moving away from a focus on car-focused design to people-focused solutions? So this is such a great point, and I'm glad somebody brought it up. So I think it's all about education. It's about what discussions are we actually having. Transport planning is, you know, it's not just about a road, and it's not just about getting people from A to B. And I think that's where that other comment is really valuable. So I think it's about collaboration. It's about getting our urban planners involved. How do they view what the street should be like? What should our cities look like in their eyes? We get our economists involved. What are the economists saying about it? What is actually financially viable? And then we can get all our environmentalists involved. So I think it's more about how do we rid ourselves of the silo thinking and the silo mentality. We've got to really ensure that we're starting to collaborate, we're starting to ask the difficult questions, and we're really starting to get people engaging and talking with each other. Okay, so then the next question. Okay, what are some of the latest emerging technologies to sustain the transport system? I think we've answered that a bit, but I will rather answer that in detail because there's quite a few that have come through. Then, how does working from home impact the demand for transport systems? So it does have a fundamental impact. We saw that during the hard lockdown, when people weren't allowed to move around, that there was a real reduction in vehicles on the road. And then we saw obviously all our public transit systems were then stopped. And, you know, now we're still trying to grapple with this. We actually have a webinar coming up on how do we take traffic impact assessments post-COVID, because there has been the shift in transport systems, you know, the demand for transport. So I do encourage you maybe dial in for that one, because I think they'll probably be able to answer that question a lot better. And then last question is, what is your opinion of the railway system in South Africa? How much of an effect do you think revitalizing the railway system would have on local and interprovincial travel goods as well as personal use? So the South African rail system, we desperately need to revitalize it. If we go fundamentally into transit-oriented development, you mostly find that a well-functioning railway system is the backbone of transit-oriented developments. So we need to get to a point that our process systems are really functioning in a way that attracts a lot, not only our low and middle income people, but even our high income people. We need to recreate this whole system that people are willing to use that, because then we'll see a big shift of people to public transport rather than using their single occupancy vehicles. And I think it's just really important. And then you bring into for goods as well. So the NatMap, which is the National Transport Plan, that's got quite ambitious goals as well in terms of how do we get freight from being particularly road-based onto rail. So I think that brings into the whole perspective that our railway systems are so vital to actually create a sustainable transport system. So I think that we really need to look in innovative ways of how we revitalize it for the better. Okay, so I see that I see that I'm actually 1 minute over. But yeah, in closing, I just want to thank you for joining this session. It's been really, really wonderful. And on behalf of the Saice Transport Division, we really hope that you attend our next few events that we have planned. And I really hope that the session has left you feeling determined, invigorated, and ready to assist us in creating a more sustainable transport system. And I just hope that everybody stays safe. Seppi, anything from you?
I also just want to say thank you. And I'm going to put now on the chat box our Saice Transport website for anybody who wants to go visit there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Seppi. All right, everybody, I hope you have a lovely evening further, and thank you so much for dialing in.